Hey everybody. For those of you who do or do not know me, my name is Andrew Petrie, aka Petrie Cosplays, and tonight I'm going to be hosting a panel for this webcon mini session called Con Etiquette 101: Tips and Tricks for Newbies. In the introduction, I'm going to explain a little bit more what we're going to talk about as an overview of this panel. But just as a heads up, that unfortunately, between the time I decided to make this panel and now I caught some sort of sickness, so I've been coughing. It comes up every once in a while, so I may cough during the panel just as a warning, but nothing too dire. So as a basic panel overview, I'm just going to note that this panel is geared towards people who have never attended a con before, anyone who may be curious, or people who are just interested in learning something new. There's going to be a Q&A portion at the end, so for those of you who have been con attendees or cosplayers and have gone to many cons, feel free to speak on your experiences, discuss what I missed talking about in the panel, or just bring up anything you feel like. So just as a basic panel overview, I'm going to give a little introduction about myself. Then I'm going to give advice on deciding a con to attend for someone who has never been, and basic steps. Then I'll go into budgeting and food, then hotel rooms and transportation, then cosplay and socialization. And just as a heads up, I'm very big into this because I'm a cosplayer. And then con rules. So just a bit about me before we start. My name is Andrew Petrie, as I said before, and my cosplay name is Petrie Cosplays. The first con that I've been to was Anime Boston 2014, and I went to that on a trip with my high school's anime club. I was very new then and didn't know much about the con scene, and I also got lost at Anime Boston that year. And then every year after that, after I started going to PAX East and Anime Boston more, it just brought up my interest in cons a lot more. My favorite type of cons are anime cons. I go to video game and comic cons as well. And the majority of cons that I've been to are located in the New England region of the United States, in particular Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and I've been to Connecticut, which is in Hartford, Connecticut once. The only con that I've been to outside of New England is Otakon in Washington, D.C. My goal, especially once things get back to normal, are to attend more cons around the United States, such as some of ones in New York City and KatsuCon, which is in DC, because I've heard a lot of good things about those conventions. And then outside of conventions, I've held cosplay meetups in Boston and at some local gaming places that I go to around Massachusetts. So I'm very active in the community. So to start out, what is a con and how do I know what type of con to attend? So imagine you're watching this panel, and hopefully you have, if you haven't, you're watching this panel, and you've never heard of a convention before, but maybe you've seen some pictures on your Facebook or your Instagram or whatever social media you use. So in loose terms, a convention or con is a large organized gathering of people that come together for a particular reason or interest. Con venues can vary from large convention centers such as the Heinz in Boston to hotels, sports venues, school/college campuses, or any other place where people can gather. So knowing what type of con you want to go to, I guess, is the big thing. Like, I'd tell you to think in terms of your interests. So do you enjoy video games or tabletop games? If so, you may be interested in a video game con. Are you into Japanese anime? Are you into comics, American or European animation, literature, sci-fi, films, pop culture, horror, history, and the list goes on. So if so, you can usually find a particular con based upon your interests. But even if you are unsure, I recommend that you all try out a con that you may not be used to. And if you want to learn something new, it's a great way to explore. So for example, I started going to Comic Cons when I was in my senior year of high school, but I barely knew anything about comics, and I cosplayed as an anime character. And even though there weren't as many anime characters, like, it was cool to see the different comic book related cosplays and learn about comics and learn about people's different interests and why comics have become so big in the film scene with all the Marvel and DC movies that we have today. So if anything you get out of this, I'm just going to say that go out and explore if you've never been to a con before. And if you have, try something new. So you've decided what con you want to go to. So in this hypothetical scenario, say you decided, okay, I'm going to go to San Francisco Comic Con. Now what? So the biggest thing I'd recommend is going online on the con's website and looking for the following. First, you want to look for registration prices, and I highly recommend pre-registering. The reason why I say this is, number one, usually cons have a day before the con starts called day zero, where you can go and pick up your badge, so you don't have to worry about getting in line on day one and hanging out with your friends. Or you don't have to worry about waiting in line. My bad. And it also helps because pre-registering, you can usually get the badges cheaper. So, for example, you may be paying like $40 for a badge as opposed to $60 or $70 for a badge if you pre-register months in advance. Second thing you want to look for is hotel information, and I'm going to discuss this a bit in a later slide. And basically, especially if you're coming from out of state, you're going to want to look for hotels, stay in a hotel or apartment or somewhere wherever you can, I guess, to commute to the con much easier. Third thing is you want to look for is the con schedule. And obviously you don't have to look for this, but like I highly recommend it because that way you can highlight what events you want to attend, look up any panels that might be interesting to you, any events at the con, and write down their room number because this will help you a lot. Speaking from experience, I remember my first year to Anime Boston, and I read the guidebook when I got the guidebook at the con, and there was so much that I could have done at the convention and so much that I wanted to do. But because I decided to, I didn't know the con and I stuck with a group of people and I didn't look up this information beforehand. I just ended up staying with my friends the whole day. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I could have done this. And I'll keep this in mind for next year if this panel or, whatever chooses to happen. The fourth thing you want to look for, especially if you're cosplaying, are cosplay guidelines. So cons can be very specific about what you bring to the con, and I'll talk about this in a bit, but especially weapon props. You can't usually bring stuff that's made out of wood or metal, and you just want to be careful with that because usually police, especially if you go to a con in the city, are in the area, and you don't want to obviously potentially start trouble with them over your prop. The fifth thing is public transportation, which I'm going to get into as well. So are you coming from in-state, out of state? Are you coming by train, bus, plane, etc.? And you want to determine that as soon as possible. And especially if you're taking a bus or plane, look up the prices in advance because some of the bus and plane systems can be really pricey and take a long time depending on what you want to use. So I'm going to get into budgeting and money. I'm not the best about this, and I'm not like a finance major. So these are just, this is just general advice. Like I'm not doing a whole panel, even though some people do that on like how to budget for a con, what to spend your money on, that kind of thing. But basically how you use your money in the end is up to you. But this is just advice I give. But yeah, obviously feel free to take it for yourselves. So the first is to plan in advance how much you would like to bring and spend on food, activities, merchandise, and transportation throughout the weekend. Cons can be really expensive depending on which ones you go to, not just with registration alone, but with all the little stuff that adds up. So obviously pay attention to that. And if you live on your own, especially pay attention because you may want to spend a lot of money at a con, but you got to take care of yourself in the end and worry about what you're going to do when you get back home about your personal life or whatever, unless you work a full-time job where you make a lot of money. Then go crazy, I guess. Also, as I said, make a limit for yourself. Budget, yeah, that's basically the point of budgeting, but like make a limit, bring a certain amount and try not to go over that amount if you can. I highly recommend going on the con's website and researching what vendors or artists will be at the con. Usually, cons put this information up on their dealers' room pages, and most of those dealer rooms have online websites. Some of the vendors that actually come to conventions only make their money at conventions, like they don't have stores that you can purchase from, but they may have online shops. Look out for con exclusive items or merchandise that you'd like to buy at the con. This usually comes into play more so with New York Comic Con, I feel like, because if you guys collect the little Pop Funko figures, New York Comic Con tends to make and sell a lot of those that are exclusive for New York Comic Con. A lot of cons, other than that, just sell like merch with their logo on it. So, for example, hoodies, shirts, scarves at PAX East, water bottles, and that kind of thing. Another piece of advice is to bring a credit card, especially for emergency purposes. You never know what will happen at a con, and if you somehow lose all the cash that you have on you, then you're going to need to use a credit card. And then vendors will charge more at their booths than at the store online. As I said before, some of the vendors will only sell at cons, and that's how they make their money. And I'm not trying to discredit anyone from not spending money with dealers room, but there are some items that like clearly will be like buffed up a lot more in price because it's a convention and the dealers have to make money not only selling the item but transporting it to and from their store or wherever they keep their items. So then another thing to keep in mind as well is that if you care about guests and celebrities, cons are usually known for this, especially some big name Comic Cons such as Fan Expo, which has cons in Boston, Houston, and Canada, as far as I know. Be prepared to spend money. Usually, guests will do either autographs or photo ops, and obviously their prices will be different, and it usually depends on their popularity. So, for example, Chris Evans or even Robert Downey Jr., you may know them as Captain America or Iron Man in the Avengers films. And these are major, aka #1 box office films that reel in a lot of money. So a lot of people are very hyped to see these big name actors that make a lot on, Hollywood or whatever they do for film. So they will usually cost a lot more. So you're looking at like an upwards of like $250 to $300 just as an example for a professional photo op with Chris Evans. Whereas some people like Rob Paulson, for example, you may know him from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Carl Weezer and Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius, so on and so forth. He's the guy on the right there. He only cost like about $25, I believe, when I met him to do a photo op with him. So once again, it really depends on the popularity of the guest. And if you want to meet a big name guest like Chris Evans, #1, be prepared to spend a lot of money, and #2, plan in advance for your photo op because if you don't, you're probably going to have to wait in a big line and risk not getting to meet Chris Evans. So next up is food. This is an interesting topic because every convention varies upon what it sells for food and what is in the area, especially in the city. If you go to conventions in a city, you're likely to find more food options than if you just go to one in a general town or high school, for example. So depending on the venue or con location, you may have to get overpriced food at the con venue. And when I say overpriced, I mean overpriced. Hamburgers and pizza, for example, just even like a slice of pizza can cost $8 a hamburger. Not even as a meal can cost an upwards of $10 to $12. So you're looking at potentially spending a lot of money. Generally, these con food is like the fast food that just happens to be around like the area or even in the con center. But a lot of the times this food is unhealthy. It's just meant to get you through a couple hours and then make you want to buy and eat the food again. It's not meant to last you the whole day, I feel like personally, but I guess everyone has their own food consumption that they can take in. So generally the food you're gonna see are hamburgers, hot dogs, pizza, coffee, hot pretzels, and sandwiches, just American junk food. And I recommend bringing your own food if you can. I'm assuming some cons, especially if they have security check, are going to be strict about you bringing in your own food, like a movie theater. But if you can, especially if like say you go to a con in the late morning and you want something to eat before you go to the con, then it's a great idea to bring your own food. Plan in advance based on how hungry you think you will be. As I said before, everyone has a different appetite, and I recommend eating 3 meals a day. Obviously, the normal breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But if you can't plan for at least 2 meals a day, this is a big thing because some people, especially I, have a bad habit of doing this in the past. So I know it sounds a little hypocritical that I'm giving this advice, but I've literally run like a anime Boston on a cup of coffee, and then and I got up at like 7 o'clock to get it, and then by like 5 o'clock in the evening, I was starving. So I had to leave the con to go get some food because I was starving. But make sure that you're planning meals throughout the day and that even if there's a cool panel that you want to go to, you can plan around it if it comes close to a time that you normally eat at. And speaking of food, cons can be very exciting, but don't forget to take breaks. Make sure that you're sitting down, even if that's just going to some random panel or thing, because a lot of times cons don't have seats like just in the hallway that you can sit in. Make sure you're eating, make sure you're using the bathroom, and make sure that you're taking care of yourself. So next up are hotel rooms. These I can't give as much of advice as like some other people I know because I've never actually been like the host of the hotel room. I've only stayed in the hotel rooms with other people when I've been to conventions. But my best piece of advice is to find a group, at least 4 people. It depends on the size of a room because hotels can be strict with the room limits. And try to find trustworthy people. Like there are con groups out there on social media that'll be like, hey, does anyone need a room? I'm staying with my spouse or whatever, and we're looking for 2 people. But I'd just highly recommend like finding a group, asking your friends, and going with them as opposed to staying with people you don't know because you never know what will happen. And the big thing about finding a group and having multiple people in a room, even if you may go 1 or 2 people above the limit, is that you're going to be saving money because hotel rooms, especially not only for a day but especially for a weekend, can be really expensive. So you may be looking at paying, like for example, $200 for a room per night instead of $1,000 for a room for a night. Location and hotel ratings matter. Try to find a good hotel because there have been stories about hotels that may potentially screw you over. Look this information up in advance. I stayed at the Hilton for Otakon last year, which, as I said, that was my first con in DC. And unfortunately, we ran into a problem where one night the toilet clogged, and then another night we found little bed bugs crawling around the room. So thankfully, I didn't have anything, but my roommate had ended up getting some in her hair. So while we were down in DC on the last day of the con, she and her girlfriend ended up going to the hospital instead of going to the convention because they were trying to get the little bugs out of their hair. Um, Pack what you need to and be mindful of your room and who you stay with. For as an example, like cosplayers tend to bring a lot, and they tend to bring a lot of props. I remember one night I was staying with an expert prop maker, and he was cosplaying like a bunch of Kingdom Hearts characters that weekend. And I remember one night I didn't break it, thank God, but I accidentally stepped on his prop when I was going back to my room because it was dark and I was trying not to wake my roommates up, and I couldn't see that well, and I was tired too. So just keep in mind of what you bring, and obviously don't bring anything you don't think you'll need. So don't bring like 10 or 20 pairs of pajamas. Don't bring a swimsuit unless you feel that you absolutely are going to go swimming in your hotel's pool, for example. Um, Also, take care of a room. Make sure you're cleaning up the room at all times, every day, every night or day if you can, and make sure, especially before you leave, because hotels will charge service fees and other types of fees for room service, and if they find any broken, damaged, stolen property. Be mindful of your hotel's check-in and check-out times and plan your weekend schedule around that. So if your hotel needs you to be out at, like, for example, 10 or 11, and there's a panel you want to go to at 11, make sure that you have your stuff in your car out of a room by 11 and in a safe and secure place instead of rushing to that panel. And then finally, sometimes cons do hotel package deals. So if you go on Anime Boston's website, they do special Anime Boston room deals with the Sheraton because the Sheraton works with Anime Boston, for example. Next up is transportation. So if you're planning to travel out of state and are relying on public transportation, then buses such as Greyhound and Peter Pan are exponentially cheaper than airfare. The big thing to keep in mind is time. So when my first time taking Greyhound down to Otakon, the trip was planned to take about 12 hours, but it ended up taking a little bit longer because the bus arrived late on that day. But just keep in mind that it's really the difference between a 2 to 3 hour trip depending on where you go, maybe farther, obviously, if you're going out of country or out of the US, than a 12 to 24-hour trip. And like hotels, make sure you keep travel times in mind because they leave at certain times, and you're expected to be at the bus on your time and have your ticket ready, all set to go. Because obviously, if you don't make it in time, you may be stuck down in the convention state or country that you're in. For transportation in cities, you can use Uber or Lyft. This is just like general information, like if you're at your hotel and you want to go to a restaurant on day 0 or go to the convention but you don't want to walk there. You can also use general taxi service, but usually those services are more expensive. I'm not going to bother getting into how to use Uber and Lyft. That's another panel for another day. And yeah, obviously do carpools instead of doing solo rides because you can save money with that. But plan in advance your time because it may take longer to get down to where you're planning to go. If you plan to use your car, make sure to plan in advance for gas costs and potential mileage. Also, be sure that you have car insurance or people to contact you in case of emergencies. So the car is just general information, obviously. Shit happens, so make sure that you have your insurance and make sure that you have someone who could potentially help you out if your car breaks down or you get a flat tire or get in a car accident when you're down in the city. And just as general advice, cities can be very risky depending where you go. So you're more likely to get in an accident in Manhattan or Boston than Hartford, for example. And yeah. Next up is cosplay, which is the thing that I said I was the biggest into. So obviously, feel free to ask me any questions after the panel too, if you'd like. Just general cosplay advice, but for the sake of this panel, I'm not going to be talking about how to be a cosplayer. So no matter who you are, you can cosplay any character you want. And there are exceptions to this, which I'm going to get into, such as not doing blackface and not doing cosplays that can potentially be offensive to other people, and not doing revealing or nude cosplays unless you're doing like Boudir, or I forget how it's pronounced, like a shoot like that. But yeah, you can cosplay any character you want. So if you want to cosplay as Star-Lord, if you're big into Guardians of the Galaxy, go for it. If you're overweight or if you think you're a plus size cosplayer and you want to cosplay as Giorno Giovanna from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, a really skinny character, go for it because no one's gonna stop you. And personally, I think that cosplay adds to the overall con experience. I say that cons are much better when you cosplay because you can meet more people and take photos with people who have similar interests to you. And I just don't think you can do that as much as a regular attendee, but that's just me. Obviously, as a regular attendee, there are a lot of amazing ways to have great experiences at cons. And then cosplay games, contests, and fan run meetups are big at cons, especially anime cons. So there's this big event, maybe some of you have heard of it, called the Masquerade, which is essentially cosplayers essentially prepare and do skits and other drama or dances or talent related things on stage, and then they get judged essentially by other cosplayers. But whether or not you win a trophy, I think the whole experience is just being up on stage, especially if you're nervous and you don't normally do stage stuff. Like, especially me, because I do the masquerade stuff, but I don't have a background in drama and I get stage fright occasionally. So, just doing that and ultimately enhancing your experience by having a good time. And then cosplay, as I said, adds an element of socialization. A lot of people who end up cosplaying, especially from similar series, get each other's social media handles at cons and become friends or follow each other or whatever. And I say that this can transcend beyond a con experience because, for example, I have a friend who lives in New Hampshire, and I met her because she styled my wig, and now she's like no longer a cosplayer, but we still hang out in New Hampshire when we can, and I get to see some of my other cool cosplay friends. So, for example, I got to hang out with one of them on Cape Cod in July, and I know that the host of, or the chairperson of WebCon, who's actually on this Discord server right now, is planning to hold a little party at the next week, which is pretty cool because I wouldn't have known about it and WebCon if I didn't meet her through cosplay. And then just bringing up the point of socialization again, cons are a fantastic place to meet people with similar interests to you. If you're in the game room, obviously you could be playing video games with other people. Cosplaying is another example. Just talking to people generally about anime, or if you happen to be in the same panel and be like, "Whoa, that was cool! I really liked this," or "I thought this was interesting," or whatever. And just the biggest piece of advice is don't feel discouraged to talk to people at conventions, whether they are attendees, staff, or cosplayers. They're all able-minded people who have similar interests to you, and they're most likely working or attending the convention because they have interests in anime or comic or video games or whatever have you. So I say keep the con experience going with social media. So, for example, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, which I probably should take away because apparently that's getting banned from what I heard, and Amino are just different examples. Instagram is especially great for cosplayers, but anyone who wants to go to a con and take photos, it's great for them. Another thing about socialization is that you can take like your general interests and put them into like what you like. So into the con, for example. So for example, I'm a history major. Like I could do a panel on the history of samurai in Japan, for example, and that would be really cool for a con scene because there's a lot of anime that's set around samurais in Japan, or people who do professional photography may take their photography skills into the con scene and take photos of cosplayers or other people at the cons. Writers may be comic book writers and end up selling their merchandise at conventions. And then artists are especially big because artists tend to set up booths. And even on our WebCon server, we have different artists who make their own products and sell them, which is, I think, is really cool. So cons can obviously transcend not only your general nerd interests, which I feel like a lot of times cons have like a stigma of people being like, "Oh, you're into that nerdy stuff," but really it's just combining your interests and putting them into sorry, someone just interrupted, and putting them into what you like. So ask for contact info of people you truly feel connected with at a convention, and obviously, make the best of it is my best advice. So now I'm just going to get into some con rules, which are the do's and don'ts of a convention. So don't touch, harass, bully, or show negative attention towards cosplayers, con guests, staff, or attendees. I'm just going to start out by saying there's a serious ongoing problem of sexual harassment within the con and cosplay community, unfortunately. And this tends to show itself a lot more online than it does in person, but there is a serious problem in person, especially of pedophilia that I've heard about, and it's really disappointing, especially that I'm bringing this up during a panel where I'm trying to get you hyped up about a convention, but just keep this in mind. Unfortunately, there is bullying towards cosplayers, especially based on race, sex, gender. I apologize if I'm not explaining this the best. The size of the cosplayer, for example, and just ultimately the goal of cons is for it to be a positive experience for everyone and for everyone to have fun. So, yeah, just make sure that you're helping to provide a positive experience for everyone and don't be an ass. Don't exhibit racism, such as blackface. Unfortunately, there are people who do that where they may cosplay as a darker character, even a Native American cosplayer, and they may darken their skin or wear things that can potentially be culturally offensive towards certain groups of people. And yeah, just these are basic things I feel like, but unfortunately, there are people in the con community who tend not to follow these rules, and it can be concerning. This is not everyone, by the way. This is just like some. So, like, if you're getting a whole pie, this is like the small portion of the pie, but it's a piece of the pie to keep in mind. Do ask for permission before taking a photo of a cosplayer or con goer, and this is a big one, especially due to pedophilia and the potentially sexual related stuff. Where make sure you're asking for photos of people, and some people don't want photos taken of them, so don't do that. And then put their picture on social media because that may mean something for them. Like, for example, someone may not want their workplace to know that they go to a convention, and if someone uploads a picture that they didn't want on social media of them at a convention, then that puts them potentially at risk of having that exposure. So yeah, just be kind. Make sure that you're asking for photos. A lot of cosplayers, especially, are generally accepting, but there are some, and don't interrupt people, such as if someone's talking on the phone or someone's in a group talking to their friends for a photo, even if you think it's a really cool cosplay. Do take showers at least once per con day. Brush your teeth, wear deodorant and perfume, and wash your hands. Unfortunately, this is still a problem, hygiene in the con community, which is one of the big reasons why I'd be concerned if cons went back and we didn't have a vaccine, which is why virtual cons are good because, unfortunately, even though people want cons to go back, we have the risk of people not doing proper hygiene. So make sure that you're taking care of yourself. This is general advice. Bring hand sanitizer, especially if the con doesn't have any restrooms or the restrooms are full nearby. If you touch something like high contact places like escalators and stuff, make sure that you're cleaning your hands and stuff. There is what cosplayers and other people call the con plague, which means that you may get sick after a con weekend, and that can usually be caused by touching a lot of these, high contact germy places or coming into contact with people who are potentially sick, but you don't know they're sick, and then you get sick after a day or a week or whatever after a convention. Don't bring a prop with you that is metal or may appear as a real-life weapon. So I said this before, but knives, guns, swords, nunchucks, etc. Most big-name cons, especially ones in cities, have weapon check and security check. As far as I know, there haven't been any cons with mass shootings or attacks, but obviously that's why you want to avoid bringing these props, because you don't want people to think you have a potentially loaded gun and then get arrested by the police for your prop. Do ask for assistance from the con help desk, con staff, cosplay repair, weapon check, and security if you have any questions or concerns. This is a big one too, because essentially they're there for you, and that's their job. So if you ever feel confused about anything, if you feel concerned that someone may be stalking you at a con, if you feel that you have general advice about like what you think could be improved about a con, make sure that you're letting them know, because yeah, that's what they're there for. And then do get at least 6 hours of sleep per day and eat at least 2 meals a day. So I said the 2 meals a day, but there's usually a rule called, I believe it's 6-1, so it's 6 hours of sleep per day, 2 meals a day, and then one shower. Try to avoid all-nighters. I know that some cons run late or run very late, so you may be going to a 18 plus panel at 11 o'clock at night, but do make sure that you're getting that little bit of extra sleep in the morning, just so you're not dead or exhausted or potentially at risk of getting even more sick if there is a con plague going around. And then last and most importantly, don't jeopardize your physical or mental health for the sake of the convention, or anyone else's for that matter. So if you're, for example, if you're someone who has high anxiety and you feel that being in a crowded scenario may not be good for your health, or you may get a panic attack at a convention, choose not to try to avoid going to conventions like that if you feel that may happen to you, or if you feel that like you really want to go to one of those cons like PAX East, try to search up areas in advance as like safe spaces or places that you can go to recover, or try to avoid obviously being in big crowds, because especially in dealers rooms, that's where a lot of crowds are, and there's not like planned distancing, although they may implement that because of the pandemic and the one-way lines and social distancing and stuff. But we'll see how that happens once cons come back. And then yeah, your physical health. Like for example, if you're someone who's not physically able or disabled, have someone help you out in wheeling your wheelchair around, or don't go to cons that you may think will, you'll be walking a lot at, or constantly take breaks if you feel like you need to. So this is just general advice, and I could go on about this, but I can't explain every physical or mental health potential issue out there. But just make sure that you're taking care of it yourself, because ultimately the convention is there for fun and it's only a weekend, so you don't want something that could potentially ruin your weekend to ruin your whole life, I guess, if that makes sense. So now we get into the Q&A portion. We are a bit early, so if people want to go on about this, they can obviously say what they'd like. I don't have the Discord chat up, so I just tell you to unmute your mic when I say go. And feel free to bring up any points or advice, especially because I know we have some of the WebCon staff on here, and they may have some advice they want to give for any newbies out there or people who are just curious. So I'm gonna turn it over to the Discord server. Oh, and then that's just my information, which I can say after. So does anyone have any questions or any points they want to bring up? I'm gonna actually take a look to see if anyone did on the chat.
I think someone's typing question. Oh, Ace of Snakes. I feel like I had one, but now it's gone.
Oh, what's up, Andrew? I know Ace of Snakes.
Hey, what's up?
How's it going?
I'm all right, man. How you been?
Good.
I know I had a question for sure when you were talking, but I forgot what it was. I'm like multitasking.
Andy's another cosplayer I know missing as well. He cosplays as Solid Snake like every time I see him, or Gambit.
Yeah. Yeah, I need to bring Gambit back.
Yeah. But yeah, if I just checked the chat. I haven't been good at multitasking, but I'll give it about like another minute, and if anyone doesn't have any questions, then I can just move on.
I have a question. What is your biggest pet peeve about just like going to cons or con culture? And like, what do you do to deal with that pet peeve?
My biggest pet peeve, I'd say, is actually the drama that comes out of conventions. I noticed this especially on social media groups where, someone, the infamous cancel culture, where it's like, I mean, some of it obviously is legitimate, and some people legitimately have done bad stuff, and there is evidence. But some of it sometimes just feels like people will fight over something really petty, and usually I try to distance myself from any con drama, or I try to listen to different points of view. But I guess that's my biggest pet peeve, if anything. I really see it as much in person than I do like online, but I know that unfortunately it happens in person.
Mhm. What's your favorite thing about a convention? Something positive.
Honestly, the community. I love the cosplay side of it so much, and I just love seeing people put like talent and passion into what they do, and then getting compliments from other people, especially when I do fan run meetups. Like for example, I did a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure meetup at Anime Boston last year, where I hosted it, and I was the only Koichi cosplayer. So when I did my panel, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, Koichi, yeah!" Like everyone was like cheering for me when I came out, and it just like it felt so great. And then seeing like people who participate in a masquerade, or even when I've participated in a masquerade and I come off stage and everyone's like, "Wow, you did a fantastic job!" And you may feel like you're nervous and your skit was the worst in the world, but you realize that other people actually enjoyed it, and I guess that's one of the best feelings you can have.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned that you're mostly on like the East Coast conventions. Have you ever gone to any international conventions, like anything up in Canada or anything?
No, and I've honestly debated that. Like for me, I want to travel the world one day and go to Europe and Asia, but I also feel that if I go to like Europe and Asia, I want to go more as like a general tourist than I do as a cosplayer. I know Canada, France, the UK, and Russia are some of the Western countries that have a big con scene. Obviously, Japan and then Philippines and Singapore have big scenes, if from what I hear.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I was just curious because I mean you have a take on American cons. I was curious if you ever been to. You're near the border. You could go to, I forget the east coast of I've been to Vancouver, so I know that coast. I don't know the other. Blanking out the other side of Canada near New York.
Toronto,
There
Ottawa.
we go. There we go.
Yeah, yeah. Toronto has some big cons too. Most of the cons I've heard about, as I said, I've only been to Otakon, and I'd love to do more, but like I don't know the major differences. I'd assume that a lot of them have like very similar stuff, like a big focus on the cosplay scene and obviously dealers' rooms and that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm just curious. Again, you mentioned a few cons on the East Coast. I was kind of curious if you ever at least dabbled, or I think you mentioned that you did want to try to go to bigger conventions. Have you thought about things like Anime Expo or anything like in Florida or Texas?
Anime Expo definitely not, especially because from what I hear from my friends, there are huge lines just to get into the convention, even if you've pre-registered.
Oh, true,
But
but it's also an experience too.
oh, absolutely. But KatsuCon for me is a definite because like I have a lot of friends who go to that, and there's a huge cosplay scene. The Gaylord looks like a beautiful hotel, and I think it would be a really fun time. Another one I've wanted to check out is Colossal Con East, which is